I woke to the sensation of cold air brushing my skin and the sharp pull of ropes digging into my wrists. My entire body was wrapped in bandages, my arms suspended from the ceiling fan. For a moment, I couldn't process what had happened. The room was eerily quiet, but a sudden loud noise snapped me back to reality. My name is Ashley Harrison. I'm 28 years old, and 3 years ago, I thought I had the perfect life, a loving husband, a beautiful daughter, and a thriving career as an event planner in Austin, Texas. But perfection, I learned, is often an illusion. Back then, my days were filled with organizing joyous celebrations and caring for my 2-year-old daughter, Mary. My husband, Brandon, was a successful software developer. On the outside, we appeared to be a picture-perfect family, but behind closed doors, cracks in our foundation were growing. I met Brandon when we were in high school. He was the quiet, mysterious type, always engrossed in his world of coding and computers. I was drawn to his intelligence and calm demeanor, and though I was outgoing and creative, our differences seemed to balance each other perfectly. By the time we graduated, we were inseparable. Brandon showed me a side of himself that few others saw, a thoughtful, ambitious young man with big dreams. When he kissed me under the stars at our senior prom and said, "Ashley, I can't imagine my life without you," I believed those words with all my heart. We stayed together through college, where Brandon majored in computer science, and I pursued my passion for event planning. At 25, we got married in a small, intimate ceremony. The day Mary was born, Brandon held her with pride, whispering, "We're a family now." For a while, I thought we had everything. But shortly after Mary's birth, Brandon began to change. His warmth faded, replaced by distance and indifference. At first, I attributed it to stress from work or adjusting to fatherhood. When he began staying late at the office and avoiding conversations, I tried to convince myself it was temporary. "Work is crazy right now," he would say dismissively when I asked about his long hours. His reassurances felt hollow, but I clung to the hope that the man I had married was still there beneath the surface. As time passed, the cracks in our marriage deepened. Late-night talks about our dreams became non-existent. He would snap at me over minor things, and his irritability grew. One night, as I sat waiting for him well past midnight, I realized how lonely I had become. When Brandon finally came home, he muttered, "I'm exhausted," and went straight to bed without a word of apology. The man who had once been my partner now felt like a stranger. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in bringing joy to others through the weddings and events I planned. But no matter how much I immersed myself, I couldn't shake the growing unease in my heart. One evening, everything unraveled. Brandon came home, his eyes cold and distant. Without warning, he exploded in anger over something trivial. Before I could react, he grabbed a stick and struck me across the head. The pain was immediate, and everything went dark. When I regained consciousness, I was tied up, suspended from the ceiling fan, my body wrapped in bandages. Panic coursed through me, but I quickly realized I had to stay calm to survive. As I hung there, I heard movement outside the room. My mind raced, thinking of Mary and what might happen to her. I couldn't let Brandon's cruelty destroy us both. Summoning every ounce of strength, I began to twist and turn, loosening the ropes. Hours later, I managed to free myself. With trembling hands, I grabbed Mary and fled into the night. My only thought was to find safety. I went to the one person I knew I could trust, Mr. Hayes, Brandon's father. He had always treated me with kindness, and when I showed up at his doorstep, bruised and terrified, he didn't hesitate to help. Over the following weeks, Mr. Hayes became my lifeline. He encouraged me to report Brandon's abuse to the police and provided me with the financial and emotional support I needed to rebuild my life. With his help, I launched Radiant Celebrations, a boutique event planning business. It became not just a source of income but also a symbol of my resilience. Slowly, I began to piece my life back together, focusing on giving Mary the stable and loving home she deserved. Brandon, however, didn't disappear quietly. He tried to intimidate me and take everything I had worked for. But this time, I was prepared. With evidence of his abuse and theft, I worked with the authorities to bring him to justice. When Brandon and his accomplice Mia were arrested and later convicted, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Seeing them face the consequences of their actions was both surreal and empowering. Today, Radiant Celebrations is thriving. It has grown into a well-known name in Austin, celebrated for its creativity and heartfelt approach to event planning. But more importantly, it has allowed me to help others. Through a non-profit initiative, I now support survivors of domestic abuse, offering them resources and hope for a fresh start. Every success story reminds me of the strength I found in myself and the life I've built for Mary and me. As I look at my daughter, I know I've kept my promise to protect her. The shadows of my past no longer haunt me, they've shaped me into the woman I am today, stronger, braver, and determined to create a future filled with love and possibilities. The warmth and love that once defined our marriage were gone, replaced by a coldness I couldn't understand. One evening, Brandon came home later than usual, his expression distant and detached. I couldn't hold back any longer. "We need to talk," I said, my frustration boiling over. "What now, Ashley?" he muttered, clearly annoyed. "You've been distant for months," I said, my voice trembling. "What's going on?" His response was like a slap to the face. "Maybe if you weren't so needy, I wouldn't stay out." Those words shattered me, but what followed was far worse. Brandon's face twisted with anger as he grabbed a stick from the corner of the room. My heart raced, fear gripping me. "Brandon, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. Without warning, he struck me hard on the head. Pain exploded through my skull, and everything went black. When I regained consciousness, my body ached all over, my vision blurred as I struggled to make sense of my surroundings. As the haze lifted, I realized I was suspended midair, my arms tied tightly with thick ropes to a ceiling fan. The coarse fibers burned against my wrists, and my entire body throbbed from the strain. Bandages wrapped tightly around me made it difficult to move or even breathe. The room was eerily silent until I heard Brandon's voice from another room. His tone was cold and calculating. "She's out of the way now. Pack everything, we're leaving tonight," he said. I froze, my mind racing. He wasn't just abandoning me, he was taking everything I had worked for and leaving with my younger sister, Melissa. The betrayal stung more than the physical pain. They had planned this together, turning my life into a nightmare. I knew I couldn't stay like this, I couldn't let them win. Summoning every ounce of strength, I twisted and pulled at the ropes. The coarse fibers tore into my skin, but I ignored the searing pain. Minutes turned into hours as I struggled. Sweat dripped down my face, and my arms burned with effort. Finally, the knots began to loosen. With one last tug, I freed myself and collapsed onto the cold, hard floor. My body screamed in protest, but I forced myself to my feet. My only thought was Mary. I stumbled to her nursery, finding her peacefully asleep in her crib. Tears filled my eyes as I scooped her into my arms, holding her close. Grabbing my phone from the counter, I fled the house, the cold night air hitting my face as I stepped outside. I had no plan, no idea where to go, but one thing was clear, I had survived, and I would do whatever it took to protect Mary and rebuild my life. I ran through the dark streets, Mary's small body warm against mine. My thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and determination. I couldn't go back to that house. Then, an idea came to me, Mr. Harrison, Brandon's father. He had always been kind to me, and I prayed he would understand. When I arrived at his home, I knocked frantically on the door. Moments later, Mr. Harrison opened it, his face etched with concern. "Ashley, what happened?" he asked, noticing the bruises on my face and the tears streaming down my cheeks. "It's Brandon," I said, my voice trembling. He hit me. He tied me up. He's leaving with Melissa." As I recounted everything, Mr. Harrison's face darkened with a mix of anger and sorrow. "I can't believe my son would do this," he said softly. "You didn't deserve any of it." He guided me to the couch, handing me a blanket. "You're safe here," he assured me, his voice firm yet comforting. "We'll figure this out together." Over the next few hours, Mr. Harrison became my lifeline. He called the police to report Brandon's actions and provided me with emotional support. "Ashley," he said, sitting beside me, "you need to rebuild your life, for yourself and for Mary." At first, I hesitated. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat. "I don't want to rely on anyone," I said softly, looking at Mary, who was now sleeping in my arms. "This isn't about dependence," he replied, handing me a check for $300,000. "This is a fresh start. Use it to rebuild, for you and your daughter." His words sparked something inside me. I realized the life I had before was gone, but I had the power to create something new. That night, I made a decision. I would use his support to stand on my own and protect Mary's future. With Mr. Harrison's encouragement, I launched a boutique wedding planning business called Radiant Celebrations. I poured every ounce of energy into it, determined to create something meaningful. The work became my refuge, a way to channel my pain into something productive. Each wedding I planned felt like a small victory, a reminder that I could craft joy despite the darkness I had endured. The early days were tough, requiring endless hours of dedication, but I refused to let obstacles deter me. Slowly, word spread about the creativity and care I brought to each event, and Radiant Celebrations began to thrive. But just as I was finding my footing, the past resurfaced. It started with a message from Melissa. My stomach churned as I opened it, dreading what I'd see. The photo showed her and Brandon laughing on a beach, holding cocktails with smug expressions. The caption read, "Living our best life." Anger surged through me as more messages followed, lavish dinners, luxury trips, and expensive gifts flaunted as if to mock me. Melissa seemed intent on rubbing salt into my wounds. At first, I wanted to block her, erase every reminder of what they had done. But then, I realized something. I didn't need to run from the past. I had already survived the worst. Now, I would focus on building a brighter future for myself and Mary. I quickly realized their taunts weren't worth my energy. Instead, I channeled my anger into my work. Every event I planned became an opportunity to prove to myself that I could thrive without them. Radiant Celebrations grew even more successful, with glowing reviews and a steady stream of clients. Still, the messages lingered in my mind, a painful reminder of the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. Yet, they also fueled my determination. I refused to let Brandon and Melissa win. I had escaped their cruelty and was building a life they could never take away. As Radiant Celebrations thrived, I focused on providing Mary with a stable future. But no matter how much success I achieved, the shadow of Brandon and Melissa's betrayal lingered. Their taunts, though distant, were a constant reminder of the damage they had caused. I couldn't ignore the injustice of their actions. They had stolen from me, tried to ruin my life, and yet they were living freely. One evening, as I reviewed event proposals in my boutique, Mr. Harrison stopped by. He had become not only a source of support but also a trusted confidant. As we sipped coffee in the quiet office, I finally voiced what had been weighing on my mind. "I can't fully move on while they're out there living like they've done nothing wrong." Mr. Harrison set down his cup, his eyes thoughtful but sharp. "Then let's make them face the consequences," he said. His words sparked an idea. Over the next few days, we crafted a plan to bring Brandon and Melissa to justice. Mr. Harrison, with his deep connections in the community, spread a rumor through mutual acquaintances that he was preparing to distribute a multi-million-dollar inheritance. Knowing Brandon and Melissa's greed, we were confident this would lure them back to Austin. At the same time, I began gathering evidence to ensure their crimes couldn't be denied. I compiled bank records showing the money Brandon had siphoned from my accounts, medical reports documenting the injuries I sustained, and witness statements from people who knew the truth about their betrayal. Each piece of evidence strengthened the case. The waiting was agonizing. I checked my phone constantly, wondering when they would take the bait. Finally, the news came through a mutual contact. Brandon and Melissa had returned to Austin. My heart raced at the thought of seeing them again, but I reminded myself that this time, I wasn't the vulnerable woman they had betrayed. I was stronger, armed with the truth and ready to fight for justice. The trap was set. The bell above the door at Radiant Celebrations chimed, breaking the quiet afternoon. I looked up from my desk and felt my stomach turn. Brandon and Melissa stood in the doorway, their expressions smug as they stepped inside. Brandon wore the same false confidence I had seen so many times before, while Melissa clung to his arm with a sickening smile. "Emma," Brandon said smoothly, as though the months of silence and betrayal hadn't happened. "It's been too long." I forced a polite smile, masking the anger simmering inside me. "It has. What brings you here?" "We heard about Mr. Harrison's plans," Melissa interjected, her eyes darting around the boutique. "A family inheritance, wasn't it? We thought it'd be nice to check in." I gestured toward the seating area near the corner. "Why don't we talk over there?" As they sat, I studied them carefully. They hadn't changed. Brandon's arrogance was as infuriating as ever, and Melissa's sweet facade couldn't hide her opportunistic nature. But this time, I had the upper hand. "So," I said, leaning forward, "what exactly do you think you're entitled to?" Brandon's smirk faltered, but Melissa was quick to recover. "We're family, Emma," she said in a syrupy tone. "Family looks out for each other." I couldn't hold back anymore. "Family?" I asked sharply. "You mean the kind of family that ties someone up, steals from them, and leaves them for dead?" Their expressions shifted, cracks forming in their confidence. "You're being dramatic," Brandon said, his tone defensive. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I know everything, the stolen money, your plan to run off with Melissa. It's all out in the open now." Before they could respond, the door opened again, and Mr. Harrison stepped inside. His presence was commanding, his disappointment palpable. "Emma's right," he said firmly. "You're not getting a dime. Every penny I have is going to her and Mary." Melissa's face turned pale, and Brandon's smugness evaporated. "You can't do this," Melissa shrieked. Mr. Harrison ignored her. "You've made your choices," he said coldly. "Now you'll face the consequences." As they sat in stunned silence, I felt a surge of satisfaction. The trap had sprung, and justice was within reach. The next day, I filed all the evidence with the police. Every detail had been carefully prepared, bank statements showing the stolen money, medical records documenting my injuries, and statements from Mr. Harrison and others who knew the truth. The case was airtight, leaving no room for doubt. The police acted quickly, and within days, Brandon and Melissa were arrested. The sight of them being led away in handcuffs was both surreal and satisfying. For months, they had lived freely, believing they could escape accountability. Now, they were finally being held responsible for their actions. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. I sat beside Mr. Harrison, my hands gripping the edge of the bench as the prosecutor laid out the case. "Your Honor," he began, "the defendants not only embezzled $300,000 from Miss Harrison but also committed aggravated assault. These were calculated, malicious acts devoid of remorse." Brandon sat with a stoic expression, though his eyes betrayed his unease. Melissa, on the other hand, looked pale and shaken, clinging to her attorney as though hoping for an escape. But there was none. When it was my turn to testify, I stood tall, refusing to let them see any trace of fear. "Brandon and Melissa didn't just steal money," I said firmly. "They shattered my trust, endangered my life, and left me to fend for myself while they lived comfortably. This isn't just about me. It's about justice, for my daughter Mary and the life they tried to take from us." Their lawyers tried to soften the blow, painting Brandon as a man under pressure and Melissa as someone manipulated by him. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge listened carefully, his expression hardening as the trial progressed. Finally, the verdict was delivered. For fraud, theft, and aggravated assault, Brandon Harrison, you are sentenced to 12 years in prison and fined $100,000 in restitution. Melissa Carter, for fraud and theft, you are sentenced to 8 years and fined $50,000. As they were led away, Brandon glanced back, his arrogance replaced by defeat. Melissa's tears flowed freely, but I felt nothing for either of them. Justice had been served. With Brandon and Melissa behind bars, the weight on my shoulders began to lift. For the first time in months, I felt free to focus on the future without fear or hesitation. My priority was clear, providing Mary with the stability and love she deserved while rebuilding a life that was truly ours. Radiant Celebrations became more than just a business, it became my lifeline, a symbol of strength and resilience as I moved forward into a brighter future. With determination and dedication, clients began pouring in. Each event I planned felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was capable of crafting joy out of the ashes of my old life. But success wasn't just about financial security, I wanted Radiant Celebrations to stand for something more. The idea came to me after speaking with a client who had left an abusive relationship. Your story inspired me, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't think it was possible to start over. Her words stuck with me, sparking a vision. I decided to launch a non-profit initiative through Radiant Celebrations to support survivors of domestic abuse. The initiative would provide resources, workshops, and connections to shelters and counselors, offering hope to those who felt trapped, as I once had. The first event, a charity auction, was a resounding success. Local artists and businesses donated items, and the proceeds funded programs for women and children in need. The overwhelming turnout and the community's unity for such an important cause filled me with pride. Meanwhile, I focused on ensuring Mary's future was secure. Part of the restitution money from Brandon's sentence went into a trust fund for her education and long-term needs. Knowing she would have the opportunities one had worked so hard to create gave me peace. Each day, I found new reasons to be grateful, whether it was Mary's laughter echoing through our home or a glowing review from a client. These moments reminded me how far I had come. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The life I was building wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and no one could take it away. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Radiant Celebrations flourished beyond anything I could have imagined. What had started as a small boutique became a trusted name in Austin, known for its unique and heartfelt approach to wedding planning. The success was more than financial, it was a symbol of my resilience and a testament to the strength I had found within myself. One evening, after Mary had fallen asleep, I sat by the window of our home, gazing out at the Austin skyline. The city lights shimmered in the distance, a reminder of how far I had come. The memories of Brandon and Melissa still lingered, but they no longer held the power to hurt me. They were shadows of a life I had left behind. Mary had become my guiding light, her laughter filling our days with joy. She thrived in the stable, loving environment I had worked so hard to create. One afternoon, she brought me a crayon drawing of our family, just the two of us. See, Mommy? It's you and me, she said, her face beaming with pride. I hugged her tightly, knowing I had kept my promise to protect her. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that my happiness didn't come from seeking revenge or dwelling on the pain of the past. It came from reclaiming my power, building a life filled with meaning, and surrounding myself with love and purpose. Each challenge I faced had shaped me, but they didn't define me. Mr. Harrison continued to be a steady presence in our lives, encouraging me to dream bigger. Emma, he said during one of his visits to the boutique, have you thought about expanding? Radiant Celebrations could reach so many more people. His suggestion sparked something inside me. The idea of taking my business nationwide was daunting, but it was also exciting. With his encouragement, I began laying the groundwork for the expansion. I hired a team to scout potential locations and started developing a broader branding strategy. The possibilities felt endless. This was just the beginning. The life I had rebuilt was stronger, brighter, and more fulfilling than I ever thought possible. For Mary and me, the future was ours to create, full of hope, love, and endless opportunities.